and welcome to another episode of Galactic Club, where we are investigating and reporting what is taking place here on planet Earth. And today we're interviewing Jme Lee again, and this time about the flat Earth, which he has been investigating for some time, and he has done a lot of research, and he's even written a book, and he has lots and lots of videos on his YouTube channel and website, Aplanetruth.info. So today we're going to talk to Jme about why it's been disclosed, why it makes sense to investigate this, and just kind of, why the Earth is not round, and, just give some factual evidence to maybe change our perspective of this place that we are alive on right now. So Jme has been investigating this since leaving Wall Street, which he worked in for a long time, and he now lives in Northern California on a 100-year-old farm. And he is investigating more than just the flat Earth, with the chemtrails, the directed energy weapons, the monetary system, who the globalists are, the Jesuits, and much more. So, Jme, would you like to introduce yourself and then maybe start off about how you came into the flat Earth topic and, some of the research you've done?
Sure, and thanks for having me back again. I appreciate it, and it's wonderful to be able to talk about a most important subject. If you guys don't mind, can I switch it up just a little bit? Because I've told my story so much. What interests you, or what got both of you interested in flat Earth? How did you understand that there may be another story here that you hadn't learned about? Can you just share that real quick so I can understand where you guys are at?
Yeah, sure, that's fun. So we've been investigating what's been taking place and trying to share it with people so that people can become more aware of what's happening here, and they can become more aware of, their other bodies outside of this physical realm, and a whole lot more that is taking place here in creation and even outside of creation. And so I was looking to interview someone about directed energy weapons, because that's, something that's really taking place now, and it's probably even more so in the next few years. So I found Rick Duarte on Facebook with his Facebook group, Weather Wars International. So we did a few interviews with him, and then he brought you on for our last episode last week, and I went to your website, and the flat Earth thing popped up, and I heard about it, from people over the last few years, but never taken the time to look into it. And so I started watching some videos, and I read most of your book, and yeah, it really just made sense once you start to investigate it. And this last week we've looked into Martin Kenny and how there's these different planes within the earthly realm, or however you want to phrase it. And so yeah, we're just doing a lot of investigating and seeing how it changes your perspective of this place a lot. And we're not just these these tiny little humans in this ever-expanding universe that's like flying, all these funny things that we're taught and indoctrinated with to make us, to make us not so grateful of where we are and the opportunity we have here to become more aware of things. So.
We also do Facebook Lives every Friday evening on one of my Facebooks, or Henry's Facebooks here, and we're with a nonprofit, so we're interested in what makes sense here: the survival, real food, real air, real water, and that's not what we have right now on this planet. Everything's being distorted, perverted, disorientated, and destroyed. So we wanted to present the idea of doing a green belt, planting trees, planting fruit trees with the nonprofits that we're with, and as a step to becoming more aware and educating people about what's taking place on this planet, and even more so, but how to connect with the all-natural environment and everyone's real awareness, and that's where we talk about the new you. But we were out there and we were watching videos, what people are doing with planting trees, and we came across the video, there are no real forests on flat Earth, and so we decided to watch that video as a group on our Facebook Live. And so then we go along with what Henry says there. So that's a little bit of how we found out about this.
The rabbit hole is very deep, isn't it? I mean, we were talking about geoengineering earlier and secret societies and whatnot before we went on air, but this is what I'm calling the greatest awakening in modern history is this flat Earth conversation, and it's very interesting in that what you talked about was very critical. And first, I got to correct you because you cannot use the word planet anymore. And the reason they changed the name from planet to plain T, like plane, Plane, T for Tierra, Earth, they just took the T down to a small case, put it next to the plane, and made up the word planet. Just like stars are destinari of the stars and their luminaries. So the flat Earth conversation takes us into a realm of discovery of a greater story than just the last 3,000 years. It takes us into over 10,000 years of what I call theocosmogony, God cosmos, that the spiritualness of either we are, just like you were saying, Henry, one of billions and billions of planets in a small galaxies in the middle of this corner of an insignificant place where billions of expansions at the speed of light and we're just not worth anything. Or are we aligning ourselves with the ancients who built the pyramids we still can't figure out, with the Native Americans, the Toltecs, the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Norwegians, and the Nords, the Far East, the Near East Asians? Are we aligning ourselves with all of these ancient traditions who did and built things we still can't figure out today, who were all geocentrists, who said that the stars and the heavens are circling around us as luminaries to bring higher consciousness to the human beings who are only 500 years out of the Dark Ages. We're dense material, but we're light beings, we're spiritual beings, in my understanding, having a physical experience. So what this really means is we're the most important part of this entire universal creation. How cool is that? Once I realized that, and once I understood that I was aligning myself with the ancients who I revere. I need to go to Egypt. I just want to spend the rest of my life going to all the mystery places and trying to figure out what they were trying to tell us. But it really is a spiritual awakening that's going on here. And then it aligns with the Bible. It aligns with the Quran. It aligns with all of these different old teachings that we are the center of this creation. That's why the stars are fixed. That's why they're called fixed stars, and they have to make up what I call the law of ridiculous numbers. Because once we get past, let's say, 100 miles an hour, humans can't relate to anything. Any number beyond that. If anybody stuck their head out a window in a car at 100 miles an hour, it's intense. And so my awakening began when Eric Dubé, who was at the time a 32-year-old Thai teacher, Thai instructor in Thailand, had written a couple books. One was called Asbestos Head, which I did not read, but the second one was spiritual, and it was about sacred science, which I was getting into a lot. And it was very profound. The book he wrote, it was really good. And then he came out with some on his YouTube site that he had. He came out and started talking about that nuclears don't exist. The whole nuclear was made up. And then he came out a month later and said dinosaurs is all made up. And the documentation was impeccable. He has all this documentation, and every time anybody that I would listen to would say, well, I got it from this book, I would order that book, and I would take that book and I would spend time reading it. Because I want to verify what they're saying, I want to see where they're saying it, and I want to see what the context is. And then I'll order another 2 or 3 books and read different versions to try and get my own understanding. And especially first edition books, because they tend to change it afterwards. So he comes up with this book, Flat Earth, as I'm getting on a plane. It comes in the mail, and I'm going with my son to Hawaii. This was back in November of 2014, or December. And I'm reading this book on the plane going, what the heck is Flat Earth? And unfortunately for my son, for the next 5-6 days, I spent most of the time in Hawaii in the room tapping away and just trying to debunk. I'm a research analyst. This is going to be easy. And that's one of the ways they get you, is you try and prove the whole geocentric flat Earth story wrong. And I just would sit there on the most basics of levels and say, well, do I really see the sunrise and the sunset? Yes, I do. Well, they're telling me it's not moving, but I see it move. So then I went down to the beach and I put up a board like Dubé suggested to prove it, and put up a 2x4 and a 6-foot 2x4 and put it on props so they were level. And I looked at the sea level. There was no curvature. But according to spherical geometry, the miles times 8 inches, I should see, get this, 66 feet of curvature if I can see 10 miles side to side. And Aristotle had said, well, we know that it's a sphere, and I need to correct you because it is round. It's like an album round with the needle in the middle. That's how we go. That's how a ship goes around a flat Earth. It actually is round in the Arctic Circle. So it is round, but it's not a sphere or not a ball. So the whole plane theory I kept looking into, and then I started looking at all the great rivers, the Nile, the Mississippi, the Yangtze, and all of these run thousands and thousands of miles. Some go east, some to west, some goes north to south. But the Mississippi, the Mississippi River goes from the north to the south, right? It goes from Mississippi down towards Mexico, down towards the equator, according to the global ball. Well, if it's on a ball, first of all, that would mean that water would have to go uphill. But the Mississippi over 2,000 miles drops about 500, 700 feet as last area of the last 10, 15 miles, which makes it impossible to be on a round ball because water always seeks its own level. Just like on a tennis ball, if I spray water on it and put a drill through it and spin the drill, the water flies off in the air. And I go, well, how come gravity doesn't hold water in if I'm trying to emulate a spinning ball at 1,000 miles an hour? And I actually did I'm into proving stuff. So I got a tennis ball, I put a drill through it, I soaked it with water, and I spun the drill. And guess what? The water did not hold in. But they're telling us and selling us that the mighty oceans are being held in while we're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour because the sun core that allegedly we have down in the middle of Earth, even though we've only drilled down 8 miles, we know it's this magnetic principle, and that it's pulling the oceans up and down twice. It's holding the oceans in while spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Yet the moon, which is 1/6 the gravitational pull of the Earth, size and density is what they say gravity is moving our oceans up and down twice a day against the force of gravity that holds it in at 1,000 miles an hour. And I just kept going, bullshit. And I was always autodidactic. I didn't do well in school because I never saw what school was about, and I just learned for myself. I just started reading, and anybody can if you apply yourself. And so then I started getting into the history. I started ordering the books, and I got back to the guys in the 1850s, the true heroes. I mean, these guys need to be brought to the attention. Guys like Gerard Hickson, who lived in North Carolina, who was a civil engineer and a scientist. And when Einstein in the 1920s came out with his theory of EMC squared about how he created this new element called time, warping time, he debunked him and proved him in many different ways how Einstein was completely wrong and that it was a geocentric world because everybody had known it was a geocentric world. And the reason they could not change in the 1850s to 1870s when they started the whole changing the story, change the word sunrise and sunset is because everybody was outside. Everybody was farmers. And if you went to the people and said the sun didn't move, they'd go, what? You're crazy. Go away. The sun rises and the sun sets. We're out here every day working it. The moon does move. So then I started another experiment that we started learning as November 2014. Then we get into 2015. I start my website called Aplanetruth.info. And I didn't want to use the word flat Earth because I wasn't convinced that it was totally flat. Because the ancients had taught that there was many, many more dimensions to this. This is just one universe. I mean, this is all taking our heads into a much greater realm of understanding of the span of quote-unquote time. That Martin Kenny is brilliantly, he's shaken my world. I'm pretty much at the top of the game on flat Earth, but he just took it to another level with his research that we can get into maybe a little later about how many other epochs there have been. How many other civilizations have been before us? Because we're limited to a 3,000, 6,000 year narrative. And now the new Common Core schooling is only teaching history back to the 1750s. We're losing our knowledge. But they've made up this story since the 1850s, the 1870s. I said, well, how could they lie to us so much if guys like all these guys in the 1850s and 1870s started doing all these experiments and showing that the water didn't drop over 6 miles, it didn't curve at all, that all these things that they said what they were coming out and saying was total rubbish. They questioned everything. They didn't believe in the government. They kicked them out if they didn't like them. They really had a say. They were knowledgeable about what went on, and that's because they had community. They were all sharing information, growing food together, sharing seeds. They talked and they protected each other. Now they've conquered and divided us where, we can only, do it in certain arenas, and then, we don't get to have our say. So these other people, and you get all these books on PDF, and I highly encourage you read them, but the title of the book of Gerard Hickson, getting back to him, is Kings Dethroned, A History of the Evolution of Astronomy from the Time of the Roman Empire up to the present day, 1922. So he's taken apart Newton, he's taken apart Copernicus and Einstein, and he ended up at the end of his life dying in his hometown, but no one would listen to him. He tried to talk. He went down to Princeton, tried to talk to Einstein. He was a pretty prestigious man. At the end of his life, no one listened to him. He ended up on a soapbox, trying to tell him that the Earth was geocentric, that Einstein was a kook, and he died a pauper. But he wrote a great book that I learned from, and all of us are learning from today, and we stand on their shoulders. So Dubé used all of that research that he got from another guy, which got into a big tiff. But Dubé launches a website of IFERS, International Flat Earth Research Society, which he named himself president, and that became the communication device for the Flat Earth meme to start discussions on. So that was back in November, I said, 2014. I do have on my YouTube channel a timeline of flat earthers. I also have a YouTube channel called Flat Earth Shill, so you don't waste your time going down a rabbit hole that isn't helping you at all, in my opinion only. But I've been at it since we started this whole game. And getting back to Eric Dubé, he was leading the conversations. And then Dubé started going off against the Holocaust and going against meat eaters and going against gay people and going against just picking fights everywhere instead of talking about flat Earth. And this 32-year-old kid who seemingly is brilliant is picking fights everywhere with people that are just trying to learn and understand and are awakening. And I couldn't understand that. And then we had some people that were trying to do these experiments that needed lasers to shoot across the Monterey Bay to see that it's flat. So I gave Dubé some money. We gave him $200. The experiment never happened. We had no pictures to work from. We had no. It was the renaissance of the awakening. And so then it became Santos Bonacci, Michael Kellens, these intellectuals started coming out and saying flat Earth. And that validated my work because I was sticking my neck out huge, and it validated what I was doing, but it was also Dubé's book that validated the truth of what he was saying. And it was coming in a place that you check in resources, and he's right. So it was a great roadmap to take you much deeper into the flat Earth conversation. And there's a reason why it's an excellent roadmap, is because they meant to release the flat Earth at that time for that reason. And we know that's true because Obama in 2010 or 11 famously said, can you tell me? We don't have time for the Flat Earth Society. President spoke the words flat Earth. Why? Why in 2011? Well, in 2009, the Flat Earth Society website was created and very quietly building up its archives of knowledge and material, of which Dubé went after when he came online and took apart the Flat Earth Society is not the site to go to, it's his site. Then we find out later that Dubé went to Washington, D.C. for 2 months, that he got $100,000 from the National Vaccine Injury Compensation. That's how they pay off their little minions. And he's a stooge for the meme to get out. They wanted that meme of flat Earth to get out, even though they were disclosing a huge, massive truth to create division. This is my opinion only, to get us more conquered and divided, just like Black Lives Matter, LBGT, blue versus red, wall versus no, Trump versus whatever, Obama, just to keep us fighting on more things. But they're disclosing a huge truth. And so I started doing into the ancients and started looking at the stars. I live out on a ranch in the Big Dipper, and the Big Dipper is really a clock. That's what the ancients always knew. It was a swastika reversed, but it had positive energy. Swastika, the way it is a negative energy field going counter. But this is a positive energy rotation, and it's a clock that all the ancients said winter, spring, summer, fall. There it is right up there. And the North Pole is the center of the toroidal field. And the toroidal field is the energy, the electromagnetic energy that forms. I'm not using the word dome now because dome is a very specific term for this much bigger conversation, but atmospheres. There's 4 atmospheres, and that's what gives us the color blue. I always wondered why the sky was blue. Well, people are saying we're underwater. Yes, but it's much, much farther away than what we're thinking of now. We're talking billions of miles. But the toroidal energy fields that create the electromagnetism of which the entire ionosphere of what they're doing all their shenanigans in, and humans and animals and rocks, as Nikola Tesla said, everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. So now we're talking about electromagnetic energy of the toroidal field in the North Pole and the Arctic Circle. So now you're talking about, think of a speaker, and a speaker has a negative and a positive charge, a cathode and an anode, and the magnet, right? Magnetism, the moon. And so here's a speaker, and that's what basically the flat Earth viewpoint is that the North Pole is the cathode, negative, and then the Arctic Circle is the anode, the positive. I may have that backwards. And so that is what creates the electromagnetic energy that arcs, and the electrolysis, the salt water is the electrolysis charge for alternating currency that Nikola Tesla proved 100 years ago when he showed us free energy. And that free energy that Tesla learned, he learned from 2 guys that need to be brought out. We need to write books about these guys, J.J. Thomson and Augustin de Chardin-Colomb. Augustin de Chardin-Colomb, I think, was in the 1600s, and this is all credit to the great research of the late Bruce Hilliard. He's the one that discovered, he was a civil engineer, and discovered electromagnetic energy existed. And then J.J. Thomson, like 60 years later, showed how it was perpetual energy. And then Tesla took their work and created the Tesla coil, and there you go. And then later on, when I started investigating all these excursions like down to Antarctica, why did they call it Operation High Jump in 1947? Well, Admiral Byrd took a fleet of 30 ships in 3 different routes down to Antarctica in a rush mission with Norway and with 2 other countries to go down to Antarctica right after World War II, and it was called Operation High Jump because they had to jump over the ice fall, and so they built these special sleds with rockets. They were laden, and Admiral Crutzen, who was running the command ship, the Olympus, a lot of these ships had to be recommissioned. A lot of these soldiers had to be called back to duty. I mean, this was something just major, biggest naval event. You know, it was just crazy what they were doing, and I chronicle that in a 2-hour video on it. And so they go down to Operation High Jump, and they jump up on the ice wall. And all the electromagnetism, because the energy field, the toroidal, get closer down there, that it frequencies out all their machines, and they all crash and die. And they bug out in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It was supposed to be a 6 to 8 month mission, and they bugged out in 6 to 8 weeks. And that's when Byrd came up. Byrd was a 33-degree Mason who died in 1957. He was murdered. And Byrd gave 27,000 pages of papers on Antarctica to Rockefeller in 1927, his first expedition down to Antarctica. So here he goes in 47, back down to Antarctica, Operation High Jump. All the equipment goes wacko. They bug back out, and they create the story about the UFOs. 4 months earlier, they started the Roswell stories in the Nevada desert. So here's Byrd coming back. And he's got the story about the UFOs, and he writes a book about it called Alone, I think, and then he goes back 3 more times. But he also took with him a guy named James Van Allen. And when in 1946, after that, they created the Antarctic Treaty System, the ATS, which is like 38 countries, number's probably not right, that all signed up at the same time. I mean, this is after World War II, so this is the Korean War we got going on. There's always wars. And they're signing a treaty that has militarized the entire Antarctic. All right? Let's take a quick sidebar here and talk about our Antarctic is 10,000 to 12,000 feet of snow and ice. And there's some mountain there, too. But it's just the biggest, deepest, coldest place on Earth. No doubt about it. But it doesn't make any sense when you look at the heliocentric theory that we're supposed to be going 533 million miles of Earth traveling around the sun for 1 year. To get back to your birthday, we have to go 533 million miles, or 1,000 miles a second. But it's elliptical, and on the elliptic, the Antarctic is actually for 6 months much to the sun. Then when it's our summer, and the Arctic is getting more sun. But it's the deepest place of snow. And what are the warmest spots on Earth? The South America, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, the closest places to Antarctica. And then we find out that you can only go on certain trips. Well, I've been to Antarctica. Yeah, certain areas. And look who owns them. They're all owned by the same shell company, and the shell company is a CIA op. Odds TV did a great research on that. This is all, we are all pioneering this stuff. Questions, questions, and questions. And so getting back to Jme and the books coming out, so then it started to grow, and you had these packs like Mark Sargent come out with his videos, 10 videos in a week. Where'd you get them? Oh, I'm a video guy. I just made them. And you'll find out everybody that's kind of like questionable in the truther movement, they all have video backgrounds, you know. But it turns out that Mark Sargent was a pinball wizard who won a pinball champ. That's his claim to fame. And if you don't disclose your background, I got a problem with you. If you use your name first before you're talking about the subject, I don't like that. And I'm saying that from experience of being, you know, now I've got over 200,000 subscribers, and there's so many more people that are waking up. But this whole flat Earth conversation brings us to a much deeper understanding, right, as the darkness of all this evilness that we've been talking about is going on. It's a great time to be alive. It's a scary time to be alive, but the flat Earth conversation can't be disproven with anybody with an open mind. It has to be open to possibility, at least, with an open mind. And you guys, and I'm sorry I keep going on, but the biggest problem I found is that people, they don't know even what the heliocentric theory even is. I had to learn that we went around at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and the equator was 24,800 some odd miles wide at the belt. So at the belt, it's divided into 24 sections at the equator or equator, and it's 24 hours in a day as we spin and go back to the same place in 24 hours, right? Are you guys still there?
We're here. We're listening.
Okay. So now we're spending 24 hours at a day at 1,000 miles an hour. That's the story. Any astronomer, any physicist, astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, they'll all agree with you this is the truth. So let's take those lines of 24 in a circle and put it on a ball. And you guys, just in your mind, take a pen, like a marker pen, and draw on a felt on a tennis ball, and draw those lines of 24 all to the North Pole, and make them all intersect at the same place at the North Pole. This is the round Earth story. So now you've got 24 sections intersecting at the North Pole. If it's 12 o'clock in Ecuador, what time is it at the North Pole? Anybody? You can't do it because it's a flat map. All 24-hour time maps are flat. It doesn't make any sense because on a ball, all the time zones would be collapsing at the North Pole. It'd be zero time. And it'd be spinning much, much faster than at the bigger section in the middle. That's just basic physics. Nothing makes sense. The planet Earth, as they call it, the blue marble, 4 times bigger than the moon, 238,000 miles away, and silver, and opaque, and dusty. Well, the blue is bright and gorgeous and resilient and reflective, and it's 4 times bigger. So, if the moon is lighting up enough that you could read a book at night or go for a hike in a full moon, why isn't the blue, which is equidistant to the sun, mostly, out of the moon? I'll wait. Then they tell you that the moon rotates. Really? It orbits. Why can't we see the black side? If we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and you tell me it's spinning at 10 miles an hour, why don't we ever see the back side? Anybody? Oh, it rotates like a coin. Well, then you look in a telescope and you see it goes back and forth, more like a switch watch back and forth. It's all a lie. Now we got luminaries and we look through the moon and we got these P900 Nikon cameras start coming online and guys start taking pictures of the occulted moon and you're seeing stars through them. And you're going, holy crap, we can see right through the moon. And then you go down to Target or your hardware store and you get a laser gun, and you take it and a temperature one that you can get for $30 and measure the temperature. It's a laser, red laser, and it'll tell you the temperatures of everything. And do this yourself, folks. Measure the full moon in the moonlight temperature and measure in the shadow. And you will find a 4 to 6 degree warmer in the shadow than it is in the full moon. You can prove it to yourself. Again, that's because the moon is plasma. It's cold plasma. The sun is hot plasma. They don't tell you this. Just like they don't tell us we're electromagnetic beings. Our heart frequency is the biggest frequency of all. That's why it's called surge. That's why you paddles to give you life. It's what they don't tell you we need to learn about. Just like they don't tell you that Washington, D.C. is a corporation founded on February 21st, 1871, which absolutely nobody knows about, nor that it was named Rome, Maryland before it was Washington, D.C. And the Potomac was called the Tiber. And there's 7 hills, Capitoline, and we're under Roman Latin law, and not one person could tell you what the word Latin even means. It's what they don't tell you guys we need to figure out. So I kept doing research. We kept going through this flat Earth chronology here, and now we're into the 2016s, and many more are starting to wake up. Some websites are starting. It's exciting, but you're also your personal life is shot. You have nobody to talk to. The internet is your life. Luckily, I had a son on a farm, and I was busy doing stuff there. But this will eat you up, and everybody listening, just not just this, but all the world events we're talking about. We're light beings, and Egyptians. I keep going back to the Egyptians, where they measure us by the weight of a feather in your heart. And even though this is so dark, some of the subjects, here's a great subject that tells us that the entire universe is conspiring to help us. This is a conspiracy, folks. It really is. And everyone's conspiring now. And all of us are awakening, and we're waking here on this cyber world, but we're also waking in our bodies and our souls, our spirits, and our minds. And as we awaken, it becomes lonely because no one gets you and you don't get them. You see everything differently now. You feel everything differently. You hear differently. You see symbology, right? You guys, you notice symbology on the bills, and you see symbology on the buildings, and then it just keeps going on. And this is what we're finding everywhere. So the flat Earth conversation, bringing it back, you get it to NASA. Where billions and billions of dollars have been going for a long, long time to create the Great Illusion. And the Great Illusion is that we've been sold and told things for so long we don't know where bullshit ends. We're not even close to it yet. And that's another thing that Flat Earth gives us. You can go back to the 1850s to 1870s, which I chronicled, of when they first started the heliocentric story, right as they built out the public education system, which got everybody off the farms to start these public mass educations with the Rockefellers, the Guggenheims, the J.P. Morgans, who had 30% more wealth than Gates, Buffett, and Ellison today. They started everything, just that latest version of it. And then you get back to the Vatican, and you get back to the city of London, and you get back to Washington, D.C. legally. And those are 3 city-states that run the religions, the bank, and the military. And it's all city-states beholden to nobody legalese-wise, admiralty law. That's where our citizenships, partnerships, relationships, we're in a docket. It's all based on water. You got a bailiff in our banking system. You got the deposit slips, currency. You got cash flow, liquid assets, illiquid assets. What's the Vatican's name? The Holy See. Because it's all based on laws from 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries now. So now we're looking at being controlled back from the old Roman days. Is still all roads lead to Rome? Yes, it does. Still today. They all bow to the Pope. And this Cardinal Spellman and the guys, Spelly's war was about Vietnam. They knocked off Lincoln, Kennedy. We got to respect who we're talking about when we're getting here, but they just opened up a can of corn about who we really are. And so I keep balancing the dark and the light, because once you shine your light into the dark, it's your shadow now. It's not dark anymore. Other people's darkness, yes, but it's not yours because you shine your light. It's your shadow. You own that. So by owning that, you look at it, and then you must find ways to express yourself. And express because you care about others, empathy starts to come to the forefront. As you start learning more and more about Flat Earth, you start wanting to share it with people, and there's no one to share it with. and you're isolated, and you still speak your truth. You write a book about it, and you got to be like Thomas Jefferson said, have skin as thick as the bark of a pine. Cost me a marriage. It's just part of the price you pay for awakening if you really want to develop yourself. And my experience, you guys, have been it's been the more I try in the path of doing service to others and awakening, the more things like the phone rings, I start getting help. I get help with my work. I get help solving problems. I get help with this. As I'm being attacked, I'm also having angels, or what I call angels, coming in assisting me. And I don't know if you guys have that experience too. I mean, you guys, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, we sing the New You song and or sound, and Claudie, who's actually listening right now, she's done a cool recording, the founder of our nonprofit, Dwayne, and it's about the Orion Queen. I can send you the link after the show, and they've gone on what we call the real side, which other people call their dreams, and they've gone to the Orion Queen, who the mother of Enki, who pretty much set up the humans as a slave race to the reptilians. And so that's a really cool adventure that's been taking place on the real side, and we've been documenting that on YouTube. And lots of people have been paying attention to that, which is really cool. And yeah, we have a strong connection with what we call the real universal guides, such as Gopal Das, Rebazar Taras, Yobel Sakabi. And, we get really cool guidance and education from them on the real side because, like you said, we say that we're free beings of real light in these physical bodies, and we're being subjected and subdued to a lot here in this physical place. So it's nice to have that real guidance and education on the real side. And, you can see it here while your physical body is awake too, or some people more so than others. So, yeah, it's a real adventure, and it's cool. And one of the things I was going to ask you is, since looking into Martin Kinney, I'm still trying to figure it out, or maybe you have your own kind of view of how the reptilians and the different alien races fit into the whole flat Earth model.
Yeah, and let's just take it where you started from, and that's great because one of the things is all our heads are listing. We're looking at time periods of much greater length and understanding. And now Martin Kinney has just taken us to my understanding, of a very vast knowledge about what Mount Meru is all about, what the Tree of Life is all about, what the Earth lands and the energy fields that surround them in their atmospheres with their own moons and suns is a much greater story that dovetails, which what I cut my teeth on once I turned away from Catholicism and got into Buddhism when I broke my back and found yoga, fixed myself and said, whoa, and went to Tibet. These guys have figured a lot of stuff out about who we are and what we're about. And so, oops, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
We're talking about you were saying how the ancients in Mount Meru.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the Egyptians go back to Martin Kinney, who my understanding, I went back to Nut and the dome of the Egyptian pyramids, and that's what I define flat Earth, knowledge as, is these ancients knew. What he's taking it now into is our much greater creation story of him. It's very interesting. I've got to be friends with him. Is what he does is he downloads through meditation the story, and then he'll go and research to find out if what he's downloaded through his intuitive mind, if I understand what he's telling me correctly, and goes and starts researching, and then he starts writing and talking about what he's finding. And he dovetails it with astrology. He does it through the fishbowl. With astrology, he does it, historical reference, mythology, numbers, gematria. It's beautiful the way he assembles this whole massive story, which I am still a kindergartner understanding what not even a kindergartner, and he would say the same thing of what he has just disclosed as a possibility of a much greater story. And to bring that to the whole flat Earth meme, so we have toroidal fields, electromagnetic energy beings. It's like from the top of your head down through your feet, grounding. They put rubber under your feet in the 60s because Converse and Keds, to get us ungrounded from Earth consciousness, they celebrated it with the Beatles album called, anybody? Rubber Soul. So Rubber Soul came out and disconnected us, but we're all a battery, and so is the Earth is a battery. And so in that electromagnetic toroidal field, NASA is really right, Mr. Kenny says, is that they're talking about 1,000 miles, we're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, but what they're talking about is the energy field, the toroidal field that comes out through the top and down through the bottom. The movie Thrive has a really good example of that. And so that whole thing with our sun and the moon going around is a great story. But then it goes on as there's 4 root races, like they say in the Bible, that emanate from the North Pole, from Mount Meru, from the tree of good and evil, and the tree that grew right out of the center of all the depictions of all the ancients, always had a tree in the center of life. And then if you get into mud fossils, they destroyed us all. The backs and the giants and the Nephilims were here, and they took it out. And then we have big, huge, massive tree stumps and stuff that can go on for miles. That was the size that used to be here before. That's another fascinating sidebar. But going back to the toroidal field, expanding it out are more lands. And these lands are the root races that emanated, and the first ones were the Hyperboreans. And the Hyperboreans were the first seed that came out of the center in a toroidal field, like a fountain flowing, it formed land. And in that energy field was a toroidal field that held it all together with their own sun and the moon. And that sun and the moon was Saturn and Jupiter. And so that evolved through their culture into, with the Hyperboreans, that's why we have Hyperborealis. It's right there at the North Pole, at the center of everything, where Eden is. We're just one step away from Eden. We're just the last creation, us white folks. And so he talks about this happening, and these lands that he's talking about, that it, like a ripple, have expanded out, like in water, it ripples out, these 4 root races. This is the outermost ring. And that outermost ring from the center point of Eden, which is right up in Alaska, above Alaska, is up to 1 billion miles out, is a land. The next land in, starting outside like a dartboard or a target board, the next one in is the Hyperboreans. And the Hyperboreans root race is India. First one's China, is the Hyperboreans, is the Chinese, and then the Indians. Forgot to mention that. So then you have the Indians, and their culture, and then you have the Lemurians at Polaria, the pole star, Poland. That's the center point, actually, where Africa emanated from way back when, whose older culture than the last ones, which are the Atlanteans, which is us. The Atlantean epochs. We're in the 5th Atlantean epoch, and that's the white race. So you had 4 different root races making rings. And so each of these root races has, like the next one out, has Mars and Venus as their moons, and that's traveling at, the toroidal field there is traveling at 1,000 miles per second. And that's what they're telling us. The Earth is rotating around the sun. So they're telling us the truth, but it's talking about energy. Are you guys with me here on this?
Yeah, I just watched the video yesterday or the day before, so it's fresh in my mind,
Yeah, and look at how big we're talking here. And so if these races are this big a creation, it dovetails perfectly with the Vedics, who is the oldest written knowledge there is and the oldest teachings we know about. And they talk about just one creation of one universe of 311 trillion, 40 billion years. And the Vedics can layer the onion. And it's an oral tradition. It's lost a lot of its known knowledge when the written started. And like with Plato, I mean, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, Socrates was not famous because he didn't write anything down. He never wanted to write anything down because you'd lose your mind writing things down. So, it's all about the mind. And now that we're entering into the age of Aquarius, it's of the mind. It's Aquarian, but it's Saturnian. It's like Capricorn. It's hard knocks. We're going to have to learn our hard lessons. But our guarantee, our souls, you guys came here, do what we're doing right now. And so I find the Hopi prophecy where it says the river has its destination, find others in the river, let those on the shore stay on the shore. But in between that time, I think, well, I'm still got a foot in the river, finding others like yourselves. I'm also doing work in the community. You guys are doing work to help others. We're expanding our compassion. We're expanding our understanding of that we need each other now, and we're building community and who you can rely on and who you can count on when no one understands that this story is such a bigger story than just, you and I. But it is all about you and I because we are awakening to a 5,000-year motherfucking lie. It's like huge. You and I. I mean, it's just, so I got to honor you guys and everybody that's listening. Is just you're in the sweet spot of humanity at its greatest time of its demise. And it's got to get back to nurture nature because you take Earth away and man doesn't exist. True story. Sorry. True that. So we got to honor and rever Earth, first of all, and sky, which the ancients did, and get back to our rituals. But we're learning. At the internet came at the same time the Mayan calendar predicted a 5,163-year stone, the Maya, which means illusion, calendar said December 21st, right, 2012. And what they were talking about is up in the Great Rift, the Great Milky Way, is our change in position of the area between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the Milky Way, as above, so below, the same hemispheres in our brains. The left brain, analytical, male, dominant, drill things, take things apart, going to the other side, to the feminine divine, which we're doing now in the big move in the Aquarian age, to emotions, feelings, big picture, dot connecting, nurture, nature. And we're at the precipice. We're at the ocean. But the first things we're seeing is some big waves. And we have to just know that the work we're doing today is so important. So important to everything else that goes after this. This isn't going to die at all. We may, but this movement, this story, this whole revelation, whatever, is a bigger story, but it makes us the center of it. And the thing I keep going back to, guys, that I've been trying to figure out, which gives me this fear of, and fear means to me face everything and respond. So when I say fear, what I'm talking about is face everything and respond. That's my fear. You make up your own. You can do that, folks. You can make up your own. And so, but I understood that they had to keep us so dark, and they're professionally doing it for so long. And the satanic, Luciferian, Baphomet putting in statues and shit, they're scared to shit of us. That's why they've been keeping us in the dark, because we have so much power. And we look at our ancients, and we see all the knowledge they have. We will know. And they were able to move tons of rock with their minds and harmonic frequencies using stones, as Michael Tillinger has proven. And so we know more and more about our abilities, and so now it becomes an inward journey of developing your own inner consciousness, developing your higher, and then the angels and everybody else is coming to help you. And so when I see people saying they don't get it or pointing a finger and not talking about the three pointing at them, I understand that's where our threshold is now to do, when you find your inner work, you're just speaking your truth, and you're just being a tool right now for the world because the world needs you. They need us. We're the only ones out there. I mean, I'm talking about this Paradise Fire along with some brilliant, wonderful people like Shelley Lewis and Valerie Jager, and it's just like we're the only one covering the greatest disaster and genocide in the history of the United States. I mean, the chess game just keeps getting bigger, but in this time, always the answer is the same spiritually. And that's the Satish Kumar guy I learned from, who actually walked with Gandhi. I listened to some of his stuff, and he basically said, when you're in a time of crisis and everything's breaking down on you, you don't know what to do, what do you got to do? Well, you got to sit down, quiet your mind, and open your heart. And when everything's lovely and beautiful and great, and everything's just coming your way, and you couldn't be any happier, what do? You open, quiet your mind, sit down, and open your heart. So that's the light feather thing about all this work. But damn, if we got a window, folks, let's take it, learn all we can, be open to flat Earth. It makes sense, and if it does, we're the most important part of creation. But it goes against everything you've ever been taught. I mean, it's just can take people's lives away. So just in fact, it has. It took my friend's Bruce's life, so I bring him up because you come out of the darkness. You're the Chiron. You're the wounded healer that has the knowledge. And it's now how you communicate. It's now you have to speak your truth because they can't unhear you. And that's why this medium is really important right now. So they can't unhear you. That's why we have a hearing in court. They can't unhear you. That's why you testify. Testify used to be testicles. You used to have to grab your balls because only males could testify in court. So that's why it's called testify, a little sidebar there. And then every corporation is a courtroom. They're all in it to make money. It's all part of corporations. So it's all been a lie, and nothing is true except getting back to the earth, growing food. Know where your food comes from, folks, because technology is hell-bent on making you into something that is not a human being anymore, put it bluntly. The chemicals, everybody's polluted with aluminum oxide from geoengineering coming down into our bodies, everybody. There's no getting around it. You can do the wine test, and you can show for yourself with a white bowl. Just gargle some red wine or gargle some apple juice, and then spit it out, and you'll see the microfibers in your and your children's mouths that are in our bodies from the spraying. And then you add some rubbing alcohol to it, and you watch these things come to life. It's the nanoparticulate matter world. It's the tiny, tiny world of technology that they don't even talk about, yet it's $1 trillion industry. It's in all our foods. They're coming up with super meats that are made from cultured petri dishes. They don't even make animals anymore. That's been gone after Dolly. And they've had cloning. They talk about, so they're cloning a cat. Well, in Sausalito, California, by where I live, they had Sausalito savings in clone back in 2001, and for $40,000 you could clone your cat back then. Technology they don't tell us about. They've had Tesla-free energy for 100 years. We have primary water. 300 feet down is all the water in most places, some places, all the water we need and want. Scarcity is a scared city by keeping us dumb and numb and dependent on the system. And the reason people have to vote, the reason people have to use their Olympic survival brain is because they don't know where anything comes from, their water, their food, or their energy. And so they have to support those systems that give them that because they don't know where anything comes from. 1900, 44% of this country were farmers. 25% of your income was spent on food. And they didn't have a word called organic because it wasn't needed. Now today, it's buy it at a store, go home, cook it, don't got time. And so we've lost the connection to and our children with the vaccines and everything. I'm sorry I have to go there, but it's all part of the truth of what's happening. We're being lab rats and controlled. And there's very demonic entities that are all part of this entire system. So getting back to earth, growing your own food, supporting a local farmer, organic. Yes, it may have some aluminum and stuff in it, but it's better than the conventional crap with nanoparticulates. Is Kraft Foods had nanoparticulates in food in 2000. And it's been going on for a long time because it's cheap and replicable at a very nano scale. And so we have to wake up to many things. And then getting back to flat Earth, have you guys got to satellites yet? About what do you think satellites are about?
No, I haven't actually come to that yet. You want to let us know? I've seen so-called satellites under the sky, or the night sky, but let us know.
So everything's frequency, energy, and vibration. So back in the 50s, they created, after the Antarctic Treaty System, they started the program called Deep Freeze, where they went down and installed all what they call satellites, which is really called over-the-horizon radar, all around the Antarctic Circle. And they made the whole frequencies, like TV antennas, the whole frequency, and then they used the atmosphere or the dome, the stratosphere, as their bouncing rod at the ionosphere. And so they could control micro-frequencies way back then. They had wireless technology since Nikola Tesla. So they were just using it on a grander scale back in the 50s. And then they did a really interesting thing called Operation Dominic and Operation Fishbowl in 1961. They undid the anti-ballistic high thermal ballistic thermal testing of nuke rockets in the sky. Ban they had agreement, they lifted it, and together Russia and the United States conducted the largest naval operation after World War II in the South Pacific, where they put 49 rockets into the dome up there trying to blast through it. And all the equipment went haywire. Operation Dominic, Operation Fishbowl. It turned off all the power in Hawaii 500 miles away because they were playing with the frequency of the dome. They were proving what they already knew, but they were trying to, and now when they talk about going to Mars, this is another thing Martin Kenney brings up, is they're talking about the energy fields going through this layer they haven't been able to get through now with this energy. Because you have to think about these energy fields being extremely powerful energies that if they want you to go through, they'll let you go through. If they don't want you to let you go through, you won't get through. That's how strong these kind of energies are talking about. And these guys in the technology and the dark side, the black goo side, have learned to manipulate this energy field of Earth with our frequencies and all our transhumanism that's been consumed through the air, food, and water, fluoride, all this crap. Unless we become enlightened beings and our frequency rises, they're going to be along the path of technology control. I mean, no doubt about it, the United States is turning into China. That's why Foxconn moved into Wisconsin. Biggest maker of all their smartphones is in China. 2.5, 3 trillion, 1.5 million employees, and they're coming to Wisconsin, putting in the biggest factory. Alabama's got China's people coming in. So again, getting back to Earth, getting back to food, getting back to health, growing your own, knowing where stuff comes from, really hard to do if you live in cities and burbs. I get it, but you can do something to support someone that's growing food that you know, and help them help grow food who can, because that's the basics of life. And then you don't have to vote for so-and-so because you know where your food comes from and you can feed it to your children and be more at home and get rid of the electronics. I mean, all the good reasons, but you're going to go against the grain and everybody's going to poo-poo you, but it's the best thing you can do. And then the best thing you can do for yourself is clean your body as best you can. But the energy fields we create are aligning with a stronger resistance to the forces that have to operate between these 8 and 12 hertz. And that's another reason they're making marijuana legal all around the world all at the same time. Why did they do Ireland, Mexico, Australia, United States, all the states, all at the same time legalize marijuana? So they had it banned since 1930s and within 3 years because they wanted them to. Because they're changing the whole thing in marijuana to keep people from being high and operating on a higher frequency that can't be controlled from these over-the-horizon radars. And to think about how acute the technology here is, think about you flying in a plane or me at 500 miles an hour at 30,000 feet, and they can get a beam of frequency at you, know who you are, IP address, upload, download, blah, 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 bada bing. Easy peasy, never think about it, right? Well, what do you think the military's had for 50 to 100 years? They're just executing the next phase of their plans using the lasers they did up in Santa Rosa and here at Paradise. They're using directed energy weapons on these high-altitude platforms and other technologies of frequency modulation and fine-tuning it to beyond trillions of frequency controls for whatever purposes and direction they want. That's how acute everything can be. So, and then it ties into CERN.